strong, pouring everything you got into a paycheck Friday night. You're a power stroke, diesel backhoe riding, king of beers, 18-wheeler driving, living life in between the lines of clocking in and quitting time. But then the six-string circus comes to town. We hang them speakers over the crowd. When the lights come on, everybody screaming, lighters in the sky, yeah, everybody singing every word to every song of the girl they're taking home tonight. When the lights come on, everybody's feeling a hallelujah high from the floor to the ceiling. Yeah, the drink that we're drinking, the smoke that we're smoking, the party we throw, it's going all night long when the lights come on.
Hey, what's going on? We are so happy to have you here, and thank you for tuning in today to talk about how to turn around an underperforming sales team in 3 steps. So first of all, I'm super excited you're here. Once again, we've had over 2,000 people attend these webinars over the last just couple sessions, and this is awesome because it shows us that it's a critical time for us to do the right things to actually help our sales teams perform better. Hey, but before I get going, we've had people from all over the world join us. And so what I'd really love is for you to actually kind of jump into the chat real quick because we want this to be interactive. And I want you to actually ask questions. My team will be in the chat. So they'll be able to answer things, and you'll see as things come up, we'll be able to make sure that we're helping you. So first, let me know where you're calling in from, or I should say, let me know where you're dialing in from. No, let me know where you're coming in from on the webinar. So just type the country in the chat real quick. Let's make sure this thing works. And that's awesome. Absolutely love to see that. So we're going to get going here. It'll take about an hour, and we're really going to talk you through a proven process. So I can't wait to get started. So let's rock and roll right now. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So what I want to share with you today is how you can enable and build a world-class sales organization in under 12 months without wasting any resources, buying random sales trainings, or guessing about what your return on that investment is going to be. So we're going to talk through our process and show you how you can follow the same process to grow your company confidently. Okay, but as we get started, I want to tell you why you should stick around till the end. So first, we're going to actually provide you the exact process that we've used to create world-class sales teams in under 12 months. So you'll know how to think about it for your organization. But in addition to that, hang around to the end and you can grab our free sales maturity model checklist. And this is an awesome resource that'll tell you right now where you sit on the 5 particular levels of maturity and what you need to do next. So we'll get that for you here at the end of today's webinar. All right, so who is this workshop for? I don't know if you've had the same experiences that I have, where you've attended a webinar, you've attended a LinkedIn Live, and you've been like, I got 0 value out of that. So let me tell you who I think is going to get the most value out of this particular time that we're spending together on LinkedIn Live. So first is B2B companies, the C-suite. If you're a CXO, CFO, COO, CRO, CSO, all the C's, right? If you're any of those things and it's your job to chart the direction for the growth of your company, it's your job to reduce the risk that your company has in not meeting its individual goals, then this is for you. So do me a favor, if you're actually in the C-suite, would you drop a C in the chat right now, just so we can understand the makeup of the audience. Next, B2B companies, sales leaders, and managers. Look, you are the absolute leverage point that your company can use to actually improve sales, and you can help improve the lives of all those who work for you. But you're managing individual contributors, and you know that that's one of the hardest jobs there is. So I think you'll get a lot out of this. If you're an actual sales leader or manager, would you just put an L in the chat? Let me know if you're here. We want to see what the demographics look like so we can tailor this LinkedIn Live just for you. And then finally, if you're in sales enablement, man, your job started off being this really big job where it was kind of not well defined 4 or 5 years ago to being absolutely critical and seeing all sorts of changes on how you might be successful or not in helping your sales team get better and have more resources to work with. I think you'll get a lot out of this too. Okay, but you have to be asking yourself, why are we all here? Why is there so much interest in a topic about how to turn around an underperforming sales team? Well, let's look at where we really are as the industry, right? So first, only 3% of buyers actually trust the sales reps that work with them. What else is going on? Second, long-term, statistically speaking, less than half of salespeople make quota. So if buyers who don't trust them, leading to some of the effects of them not actually making quota. Going to the following statistic, that only 6% of CEOs are confident that their sales team can lead them into the future. More importantly, if you look at, there's a study also by CSO Insights that says only 16% of sales leaders are actually confident in their current sales strategy. So that's something else that we have to pay attention to. So it's a super critical topic for us to figure it out in this ever-changing economic climate. So I'm curious, in the chat, how many of you feel like your sales strategy is on point and that you could simply grow the company as fast as you want to? So type a Y in the chat if you say yes, type an N if you're not confident. Love to see what those results look like as we continue down this pace. So we've got some other stuff going on here, and I want to let you off the hook because I've painted a pretty grim picture. Why is there such a poor outlook? Why are CEOs why aren't they confident? Why aren't VPs? Why aren't sales managers or CROs confident in their sales strategy? Well, there's been a few things that have been going on. So first, let's talk about this kind of by role. So if you're an executive, if you're in the C-suite, you've had a massive amount of things happening. So one is, over the last 2 years, 50% of sales leaders are brand new to their job. So if you've had a new sales leader, sales manager, CRO, or CSO, go ahead and type a Y in the chat right now. Would love to understand whether or not you're seeing the same things that the data's seeing. So that's the first component. If you haven't seen that, give me an N. That would be awesome. Next, this is the part that's a little scary and relates back to what I talked about. 85% of your senior leadership in sales are considering leaving if the economy doesn't turn around. So not only does that say 50% of companies have a problem because they've got a brand new leader in, which takes time to help, but in addition to that, more than 3 out of 4 are considering leaving if the economic pressures don't decrease. And the last thing that's really, really struggled for CEOs, CXOs, anyone in the C-suite has been this. 73% of people want remote work. And I know that the data can say some different things, but what I hear when I talk to people just like you is that remote work actually decreases productivity, that it decreases collaboration. And you see it every day, right? You have Zoom meetings that are 30 minutes and 30 minutes and an hour long. They used to be 5-minute conversations in the hall. And so you're really feeling that time crunch. Okay, next. Man, there's a crazy puzzle right now if you're a sales leader or manager. So first of all, your sales team, going back to the Zoom meetings and everything taking too long, is only spending 24% of their time actually selling. That's a real struggle. So that's the first thing. That number, by the way, is down 1/3. So it used to be 35-ish%. So it's down about 1/3 or 33% below what it was just a few years ago. And that's self-reported by sales folks. Second, over half your staff's feeling burnt out. So they're spending less time selling, being less effective, and they're feeling burned out. And then the more we push them, the more we don't get any new real response. Also, turnover's way up. It's up 58% in the last 2 years. I'm sure you're seeing this in the sales force. Everything's turning over. You're seeing that you've got a percentage of your staff who's all been there under 1 year. How many of you in the audience right now, how many of you watching this have a sales staff where you would say 25% of them have been with you less than a year. So if they've been with you less than 1 year, type a 1 in the chat. If you've got, say, 25% of them that are less than 2, type a 2. Let's see what that looks like broadly based. Second, they say that it's the number 2 in-demand job next to software engineering, meaning there's a ton of pressure on the position. And that's creating some phenomena that make it very difficult to lead a team. Here's the issue. Experience is down because of that. We have people who come up, they haven't seen a recession, they haven't seen changing economic climates, they haven't been trained or have the skill sets. So while experience continues to be down, we continue to push quotas up. There's a phenomena that if you look at, there's a publication called Chief Learning Officer, and there's a phenomena right now called quiet hiring. You've heard about quiet quitting, right? People just sit around and don't do any work until somebody fires them. Well, quiet hiring is quite the different, and this is what's happening to sales teams. And this is why I think some of the things that are going on are to be expected, right? We have less experience and we're putting on higher quotas. We're spending less money on training, but we're putting higher quotas. We're expecting that our salespeople, the only reason they didn't succeed last year must be because they're lazy, because we're increasing their numbers this year and we're trying to tell people and ourselves they'll hit them. So the quiet hiring phenomena of putting more demands on the same amount of people because we can't hire enough is creating real pressure for you as a sales leader or manager. All right, sales enablement challenges. This sales process you see here has only gotten more and more complicated with more and more stakeholders. They say that there are 11 stakeholders in any individual buying decision for mid-market and higher companies, and that's a stat by Gartner. So you have that going on. So how do you figure out how to use technology? Sales tech stacks have exploded. They're integrated poorly, and you're trying to give on-demand access to the training tools and resources that the team need without any budget. But what else is going on? When sales enablement first came around 5-6 years ago, as it's called today, we got to get people together face to face. 70% of buyers would say they prefer not to meet with people face to face. Okay, well, that's buyers. That's not your team, right? But that corporate policy of the buyers not meeting has turned into your company probably not bringing people in on a quarterly basis. You may be lucky to get them into a sales kickoff just once a year. So I think we've painted a picture that shows you that your seller's lack of consultative sales experience is being exposed in their meetings. And this leads to some very specific outcomes. Lower closing percentages, longer sales cycles, pricing pressure like you haven't seen. You have lower closing rates, longer cycles, and those all lead to lower margins. And so those are interesting but scary things when you really think about it. And as a leader trying to lead your company into the future, this makes it almost impossible to know what to fix and how to do it quickly. Okay, so before we jump into, and we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of what we call the Sales Alpha Roadmap. But before we do that, let me just make one thing really clear. If you hate change, you're going to hate extinction. The stats say 84% of sales leaders aren't confident in their sales strategy. The stats say only 6% of CEOs are confident that their sales forces can lead them into the future. That's some pretty daunting data, and it's been revalidated over the last couple years. So you got to understand this. If you want a different result, you'll have to try something different. Just like if you want to lose weight, it all starts with the first step you take to go walk around the block. And so know that if you hate change, you're going to hate extinction. So let's talk about why these things are going on. A big piece of it is that we're treating the symptoms. We're not treating the root causes of the things leading to poor performance. So when we really think about what's happening, know this. One, we're not talking about a changing sales culture, right? Millennials coming in, anybody under the age of 40 has never sold in a recession before. And whether you believe we're going to a recession or stagnant or something, the buying environment has definitely changed. Sales processes are failing because they're not keeping up with the actual change in buyer behaviors, and those are things that get very, very complicated very quickly. We also have this issue of when was the last time you benchmarked or had a written plan about we're going to execute on these things in this order to know what you could actually do to improve the performance. In addition to that, there's a lack of sales training. Companies aren't doing enough of it, right? We're expecting more from people without helping them enhance their skill sets. Change management's an issue. How many of you have had, because I know I've had it in my life, how many of you had some sort of awesome change initiative you knew was in the sales force's best interest, and you got 80% of the way there and you couldn't execute the rest of it, and that change failed? So just type the word F for failed if you've ever had that happen to you. Next, sales strategy alignment. We find when we survey executive leadership down to sales managers that there's generally a lack of alignment between the different paces. You may say, oh, volume is what we care about. You may say margins are what we care about. But oftentimes we find that executives are saying we care about margins and we're paying people on actual volume. And then you start to see why things aren't going the way that they should. And last, has anyone ever spoken to you about your salesperson's belief systems? Because their mind can get in the way of the execution of their skill set. And then the elephant in the room, and we talked about it earlier, the number one point of leverage that any company can get is by improving the effectiveness of their management team. And we don't talk about that. We talk about how only 47% of sellers make quota, but we don't talk about how the manager contributed or detracted from their ability to make quota. Okay, so let's change the questions that you need to ask so that you can get better results. So first is, let's talk about the frequently asked question, right? How do we sell more? Well, you've seen that. You've asked yourself that, and I know I used to. You'd ask yourself that, and you have these just different ideas that come up, and you throw them at the wall, and none of them really stick, and it doesn't work. The right question, though, is to analyze how much more could we be selling, and to put a dollar amount on it, and a time frame amount on it, and KPIs to help you drive the success. We also get this question all the time. People come to us, man, we need to create more urgency. How do we do that? Well, you can't create artificial urgency for your prospects. On the other hand, what can you do? Well, you can help align your prospects to the most important priorities they have to close them faster. Because if it's strategically important to them and we align to that, they're going to want to drive the pace of the engagement as well. And then here's one we get all the time. How many of you have bad CRM? Just type yes in the chat or why. How many of you have CRM data that stinks or your pipeline you can't forecast better than about a guess with? And so oftentimes we get from managers and executives, hey, how do we get them to follow the process? And I say the right question is, do our systems and processes support a high-performing sales organization? And the difference is taking personal responsibility and accountability as an executive team and a management team versus blaming it on your sellers. Here we go. This is what you came for. We're going to jump into what we call the Sales Alpha Roadmap. And I want you to know you can turn around and build a world-class sales organization in under 12 months. So what is the Sales Alpha Roadmap? Now, I know that I'm a broad guy, and oftentimes people are like, oh, me Sales Alpha, me beat my chest. That's not what it is at all. We want to tell you what the Sales Alpha Roadmap is and why this process can help your company. So first, alpha, if you take it from an investing perspective, it's a term that's used to describe a strategy of the ability to beat the market. It's often referred to the edge. So alpha is excess return, right? It's an abnormal rate of return. How would we define that? So we're talking about the contribution of management and company to beat the market. So if your industry is growing at 10 and you have a strategy and a process in place that grows you at 15, you have an alpha of 5. And so that's something that's critically important because if we can't create an alpha, we can't gain market share. If we can't gain market share, then we're subjected to only have the success that the current market has. Well, this is pretty exciting stuff because we're going to show you how to get an edge versus your market and your competitors. And we're going to do that because I want to share with you 3 key secrets. So first, we want to talk about how to know what exactly to do in under 30 days. Second, how do we get quick wins so we can maintain executive sponsorship? And third, how do you produce a long-term ROI that thrills executives, provides you job security, and allows you to live the life that you want with your family? So we're going to talk about these 3 secrets as we talk about the Sales Alpha Roadmap. So who remembers what I said the primary goal of today's webinar was? Right. If you remember it, type yes in the chat, and let's see if when I say it, you get it right. The primary goal today is for you to know that you must use a scientifically established process to remove the risk of investing in and growing your revenues and your sales team. So the Sales Alpha Roadmap is based on science. It's based on the data that we have from 2.5 million sellers at 33,000 companies in 200 plus industries. Now, what's interesting about this is I get all the time, hey Ken, but we're different. And let me tell you that while fundamentally you may be slightly different, companies may vary in products and services, but the path to growth and market share expansion does not. It's the same process, no matter what your company looks like. So here we go. Let's talk about the 3 distinct phases of the Sales Alpha Roadmap and how you can use them to grow your company more effectively. So phase 1, we call our auditing phase. Now, that's really, really important because it's one of the areas that tends to get skipped by executives and managers. Instead of assessing where we are today so we can benchmark against where we want to be, we just say, oh, I've done this before, so my experience is this. But the composition of your team may be very different. And so what we're trying to do in this particular idea, in the previous case, you're assuming that the things you're going to do are going to have an impact. I just wonder how many of you have ever assumed you were going to do something or assumed that you're going to put a change in place that was going to have a positive impact and it didn't. That's tough because then you start to get that reputational risk too of not following through and not being able to get it done. So our goal here is to move from assuming to planning in the audit phase. What do? Well, there's 3 specific areas we look at, and we do them for a very specific reason. First, you have to understand your people. You have to move from knowing what is happening, which might be we're not hitting quota, Jimmy's not selling enough, Mandy doesn't have this going on, our pipeline's inconsistent, to knowing why it's happening. Like we'll often get questions like, hey, why don't we have more new logo expansion? And we'll find in this audit process that, well, it's because they don't have the skill set. Or it's because their mindset might be goofing up things. But you have to understand each individual person so that way you can put a plan of development in place for each of them. Next, we want to move towards and understand the alignment at all levels. This helps us figure out how we move from individual performance. So how many of you have 20% of your sellers that are responsible for 80% of your revenues? Or a vast majority, or 20% of your sellers are responsible for 60 or 70%. That puts you in phase 1, 2, and 3 of our sales maturity model because we're still relying, even though we may have some processes in place and other things, we're still relying on the individual efforts instead of team effort for consistency. So we have to understand and check out what the alignment looks like. So I want you to think about that too. Also, we want to look at your systems, right? You want to understand how do your systems compare to those of others? How does my team execute on those things? And why does that happen? Because we want to continue to understand the real big things behind it. So first, when you're auditing, we need to audit the people, we need to audit the alignment, and then we need to audit the systems. We want everybody singing from the same hymnal using the exact same instrument. So in the audit phase, that's what we need to make sure we're paying attention to. All right, so what happens after we do the audit? Well, I've been an executive leader for a number of companies, and one of the things I know, and I'll bet you that you know that too, is people lose faith pretty fast. So our next phase is the accelerating phase. And that's because we understand the fundamental value of helping move your team from missing quota and missing sales to going ahead and hitting or exceeding quota as quickly as possible. So the next phase after the audit is for us to accelerate the returns on that audit. And we want to help figure out how to get quick wins. So when you're constructing this for yourself and you're thinking, oh, audit, accelerate, think about how do I bake in where I know that I have these specific things which will give me quick wins, because that'll help you maintain financial sponsorship. When we look at it from an accelerating perspective, we look at bias, and it's interesting because most people don't. Our confirmation biases, our mindset, either sabotage or produce sales results. So as an example, let's talk about that. So assume for a second that I was an all-American swimmer in high school. Fast forward, in college, I had a near drowning event in a lake. Heart stopped, CPR had to come through, had to take me to the hospital. Oh, just a nasty situation. And now my mindset may be, if I get in the water, I'll drown. So how does that apply to bias and mindset? It applies in this way. I have all the skills. I was an all-American swimmer. But because my mind gets in the way, I won't execute on those skills. The same thing happens with your people. And so we need to understand their biases so we can help them go from sabotaging their results to producing better results. And so understand their self-limiting beliefs and what they're thinking about. We have a concept called doesn't need approval. And the problem with that is when somebody needs approval, they need to be liked or loved more than they need to be respected. And it'll stop them from doing some of the necessary sales motions, asking important questions, finding out about budget, setting collaborative closing dates, scheduling the meeting in the meeting. Those things come up. Next, skill set. We want to start to train and enhance the skill set of the team. So this is what I'm talking about. So if you can take the thing and understand where they are thinking, and then you can build stuff around the skill sets, because in the audit, you figured out where your skill sets were lacking. You can build the skill set and you can move from having people have an instinctual success to repeatable success. Because whether it's hunting, it's account management, it's reaching decision makers, it's closing, it's sales process, technology, or any other skill set that you can think of, we have to train it. I'm not going to argue who's the greatest basketball player of all time, but LeBron James still starts every day by dribbling the ball. And that's how he started as a toddler before he could shoot it into the hoop. So we got to do a better job of setting that up so we can train on those skill sets. Okay, what else? Well, here's something that gets largely ignored. Are you recruiting the right talent? So if you want to accelerate results, then you need to be able to take your recruiting from unreliable guesswork. I bet you have a process. Who has a process in place for recruiting? Just type a Y in the chat. Because what I bet I'm going to see is that everybody's got some sort of process. But is it an effective process? What's your turnover? What are the things happening? How happy are your people when they come on? Right? 87% of people leave a company due to a poor onboarding experience in sales. 47% of people feel like they were lied to in the interview process because the job that they're doing was not the job they thought they were being hired for. So what we do is we want to talk about how do you make that recruiting process more reliable. So you can go from unreliable to measurable. So you can look at your CEO, or so you can look at your investors, or you can just know you can grow your company. If you say you want to grow 38 million next year, because it's measurable, we'll know exactly who to hire and when. But we have to start at the front end because you have to get good ingredients to start with. That's what we do in our STAR program, which is 91% successful at hiring high performers in the first year. And so that's something that's critical as you're trying to accelerate your gains in the short and the long term. All right, so the third phase of the Sales Alpha Roadmap is the advancing stage. And what does that do for us? Well, here's what it does. we want to move from sporadic wins. You get a win, you get a setback, you get a win, you get a setback. So we want to move away from that to where we can have a consistency of what's happening. Because too often we'll have some hit or miss successes based on doing the little things in the accelerating phase. But what we want to do is take those things and then let them compound on top of each other. So you just say, how fast do you want to grow? I can throw some fire on it. Or some gas, since I misspoke. But you can say, we can do that. So what are the 3 phases of the advancing stage? And how should you look at it for your business? So first, frameworks. Frameworks are critical. If you don't have ways for people to actually repeat what they're doing and you're relying on a salesperson's just, how they feel about something to do it, you'll struggle. And so we need to move from, we've shown them this once, to we're practicing this all the time. So with frameworks as an example, do you have a framework for a discovery call? We have something called the perfect meeting. It's six steps. There's 6 things that go into it. And that perfect meeting format can be used in every sales call that people have. We talk to them about how to set the agenda, and we have a specific format with a specific question that's been proven to be successful for billions of dollars in sales. So you want to make sure you have frameworks in place so that you can repeat the success that you're trying to have. Next, sales process. So how do we know if we have a haphazard sales process? Well, probably the best way to understand it is this. Maybe you have a haphazard sales process if you have deals that get stuck in stages for extended periods of time. Because although the buying experience has changed, as an example, 3 years ago, Gartner said there were 7 people in every kind of executive buying decision. And the most recent data says 11 are in that. But if you have stuff getting stuck in stages constantly recurring, or you have something, your pipeline is heavily loaded in one place or the other, you probably have a process problem. What are we trying to accomplish? Does your sales process define the gates for how you go from step 1 to step 2? Does it say these things must happen? Does your sales process have a way to push things back in the pipeline if they're not actually moving along and they haven't set a meeting? So you have to understand the process so you can go into a defined process with repeatable success. So pipeline. I think everyone on this call, I pause because I think everybody on this call has probably had the experience where they're in a situation where it's hard to guess what the team's going to sell in the next month, let alone in the next 3 or 6. And that happens all too often. So how do you know if you've got a pipeline problem versus the best companies in the world? Well, here's how you know it. You'll know that you have a pipeline problem if you can't forecast 90 days out with a 10% margin of error. If you can't be 90%, if your number's supposed to be 50 million at the end of the second quarter, end of the third quarter, whatever it is, and you can't forecast to that being committed, then you might have a pipeline problem. And it might be how people are entering it. It might have stuff to do with the process. But here's the deal. As an executive or sales leader, our pipeline must be predictable. Because if our pipeline is not predictable, it's hard to forecast. It's hard to spend money. It's hard to get budget. It's hard to improve. It's hard to know where to double down. So in the advancing stage, you really have to work on what does the pipeline look like? And these are the most important critical things when you're talking about trying to compound your returns over time. So I'm curious, before I show you how all these link together and why they make such a great path that's based on science for you to grow your company, what's the number one takeaway or a surprise learning that you've had today? Dump it in the chat so that other people can hear it and other people can maybe learn from you as well. Because we all need to learn from each other to some extent. So let's talk about how these things link together. So we start with the auditing phase. So first of all, auditing, remember how important that is because it sets the stage for what the ROI is going to be, the time frame, and it allows us to look at those 3 specific components. I wonder if any of you can tell me what are the 3 components in the auditing phase. If you can do that, drop it in the chat because I'd love to see it. Next, we want to accelerate things. We want to maintain financial sponsorship. We want to structure this in a way that gives us some wins so that everybody's on board with the changes, because we need to create an impact. So you'll feel comfortable getting the money, spending the money, and more importantly, honestly, your salespeople and sales managers will jump on board the train because they'll realize that it will benefit them. Next, we go to the advancing stage. Now you can see how these things are starting to come together. They're interconnected because they do some very cool things for you. So one, when we link accelerating, we do our quick wins, and then we're working on how do we compound these wins and how do we put this in a process that will help us win over time. That gives you a massive amount of confidence that you'll be able to meet or exceed the revenue number. And then by linking the auditing phase, which sets us up with the roadmap to advancing, we have a predictive sales system. We can actually predict outcomes rather than just hoping for outcomes. And all of those things then create sales alpha, right? They create your edge, your abnormal excess rate of return versus your market. And if you're picking up market share, then you are definitely growing, because you need to grow faster than your market in order to actually have the things that you want. All right, so here's the 3 things. I asked how many people remembered it. In the auditing phase, we need to understand our people, our alignment, team and individual. How are we doing that from management and above all the way down to the individual seller? And then what do the systems look like, and do we have systems that will support us? In accelerating, we're dealing with biases and mindset. We're training on that. We're training on skill sets. You're putting in a recruiting process that actually can bring on superstars instead of a recruiting process that we just kind of guess. Ask any of your HR professionals, or I'm sure you've experienced it. Recruiting salespeople's tough unless you have the right process in place. Next, advancing. We want to make sure the frameworks, process, and pipeline. We've got to make sure those things are in place, because those things will help us compound the returns on the trainings, on the ROIs, on the roadmap as we go forward. All right, so where does this leave us? Well, this leaves us, let's compare the old way versus the new way. So first, the old way was a best guess effort with a coin flip. And the coin flip was a chance of improving the sales team or not. We were just throwing stuff at it based upon our best guesses. Right? The new way is a process rooted in the science of 33,000 companies to improve the effectiveness of your team. The old way, assuming, right, raising quotas will produce more sales. We talked about quiet hiring, right? We know you're hoping. We know that giving somebody a $2 million quota when they failed to hit their $1.2 million quota the previous year, we know that doesn't work. But we're forced into doing it all the time. And so as an executive leader, we've got to know that. The new way is knowing how much more your team can sell, in what time frame, with what specific action plan to achieve it. Last one, old way. We're hoping we hire the right people. And then we invest in them alongside of those who may never perform. We don't know if they're coachable, if they accept responsibility, if they're committed to the role, if they even have the desire to be successful in sales. The new way, we know exactly who we can have the best opportunity to be successful, who to invest in, and so we get a maximum use of our dollars by giving them the resources that they need. So what happens when you implement a system like this in your organization? So first, you have a best-in-class sales org that outperforms competitors with strong sales culture that top performers want to be a part of. You feel a level of confidence that every pillar of the sales org is functioning and supporting one another, and you know that you'll meet or exceed your goals. You go in your average day from putting out fires and spending time with low performers to working with your top performers and driving sales results. And ultimately, you move into the top 6% of all sales leaders, because there's a very slim margin for those who are successful leading sales teams. And we know that because the average sales leader turns over every 18 months. So wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't it feel great to have a best performing team, feel confident they could do it, work with your top performers, and know that you're one of the top sales organizations in your industry or in the world? That would feel pretty absolutely awesome. So put it in the chat, man. If you think that would be awesome, just put a yes, yes, yes in the chat. So let's talk real quickly about companies and people who have implemented these processes, because I want you to understand it works. And if you'll just follow that system, you can implement these same processes within your company. So first, Stacy Henry went from CFO to CEO of Big Dirt Ranch. When we got to her, they went from bankrupt to being acquired by a large publicly traded company. Now, what's really, really cool about this is Stacy herself has said, from a CFO to CEO, she had no idea of sales process, etc. But we were able to implement predictable systems that help them grow. So what did that look like? Well, we increased revenue by 485%. 2.5 years of declining sales when we got to them. And from that, we were able to help them 3x monthly sales in 90 days. If your team's underperforming, man, wouldn't that be awesome? That'd be something great to understand. Next, sustainable revenue growth over 5 years. That's how they got to the 485%. Because what we did is we combined the ability to audit where they were with accelerating to quick wins and then advancing compounding returns. So you can follow that same process. So Don joined a team and he was working on an account that had only done about $400,000 in revenue with the company. And they'd been through 2 to 3 sales reps to try to increase that number. So Don's been a part of us and been somebody that we've worked with for a number of years, and check out the success that he's had. So from going from 400,000 to 25 million in annual sales, Don's a rock star, and he's also one of our clients. One of my favorite clients. He's a chief revenue officer for a company called Project 202. And we were talking, and he said this to me. Sales leaders can be arrogant. We think we have it all figured out. We think we can be smarter and better than everyone else. There are a lot of things that RevHeat does for us that we already knew, but the real growth came when I could finally realize I couldn't deliver it as fast and as effective. RevHeat solves real problems for us. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. And that's so true. Look, sales leaders, CEOs, etc., you guys have had awesome careers. And truthfully, we're not saying that we know how to do it better than you. We've just got a better plan of attack with actionable steps so we can help make an impact faster. Many of the things we'll suggest, you'll know. The difference is we have the jigsaw puzzle laid out on the kitchen table, and it was kind of a color by number where we just stick them together. Whereas sometimes when you're doing the jigsaw puzzle, you don't even know what the picture's supposed to be. So that's what we can help with, is help get to time of impact. All right. Individual sales reps who have been a part of this process for companies. So Randy is fantastic. And when you see what he's been able to do in fintech, so he's been the number one salesperson for his company, well, 2 companies, right, since 2017. And he's on pace to do it again in 2023. I know it's early, but Randy has shown that by taking skill set, mindset, and putting all those things together, understanding the training, and being a part of our process, that he became the number one seller for the last 5 years. And that's carrying a book of, say, 40 million versus a company that's doing 200 million. So he's a big piece of their success. Randy Remersma, who I actually at one point was able to work with back in the day, but Randy had this to say about it, right? RevHeat's team are one of the finest and most comprehensive development teams I know. With years of sales leadership and experience, their team built a content around. They are really top 10. Randy's the senior AV for enterprise business at MuleSoft. All righty, so here it is. I got to ask you. So can I ask you a question? We were putting together this live webinar. My team and I were discussing it, and we were like, okay, What can we do that's different? Yeah, we're going to give you the checklist and we'll give you an opportunity to get that in a minute. But I'm curious, we put together a special on how we go through the audit phase, just phase one. It's about a 30-day process. But I'm curious, let me know in the chat. I mean, are you okay if I share with you what that would look like? Put a yes in the chat. It's one of those things we went back and forth on. I wasn't quite sure how comfortable I was doing it, but we wanted to create a special offer for those of you who hung around till the end, for those of you who really, really want to help accelerate the gains and turn around an underperforming team. So, drop a Y in there. Let me know if that's something that's cool with you, because I'd like to be able to share it with you, or not. So give me a Y in the chat. We have something called the Sales Team Effectiveness and Improvement Analysis. That is how we do the audit, and so that's something that I want to be able to give to you. Here's the offers that we're going to give. Here's what you can get. So first, we will do industry and company personalization in this, which we normally charge $2,850 for. So we'll actually let you compare where you sit internally, people against people, as well as where you stand in your industry. So that's first. We usually charge $2,850 for that specialization. If you look at it today, that's free. In addition, you'll get a personalized readout with the executive team that I will help with personally. So you won't get one of our team members, but I will sit down with you, with your executive team. The personalized readout with the executive team is normally $3,300. But I'm going to give that to you for free because you came today, and I'm excited that you have enough knowledge and enthusiasm about how to fix things that this might work for you. All right. So let's go over this again. So we're going to give you the industry and company personalization for $2,850. We'll give you a personalized readout with me, which is normally $3,300. And then we'll top it off by providing you with our revenue acceleration roadmap, which is the 10 steps on the things you need to execute on in the next 12 months to meet your goals. So that's a total value of $9,950 of just free stuff for joining this webinar today. And by the way, it's got a 100% money back guarantee. If it's not actionable, you'll get your money back. So what does it cost though? That's a really good question, and that's what everyone asks. So as you can see, the cost is between $300 and $700 per person usually. So a team of 20 costs around $10,000. So a $10,000 cost, 9,950 things to make it more actionable and more personalized for your specific lot, your specific company, and your specific industry. All backed by a money-back guarantee. If all this did was finally told you which team members you should invest in, would it be worth it? If it provided you 100% clarity on how your team could sell between 30 and 100% more, would it be worth it? If it gave you the ability to confidently move forward and advocate for a plan of action to make your team more effective, would it be worth it? How about if it helped you know exactly how to coach your team for maximum impact? Would it be worth it? I think if it provided you just one of those things, you'd find that it was worth it. Here's how you can take advantage of that fantastic offer. So that offer is good if you just have a strategy call. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to do one better. You get a strategy call with me rather than one of our salespeople. And we'll sit down and talk over 25 minutes. Just figure out whether or not we can help, whether or not it makes sense. Because the truth is, we may not be a good fit for you. But we've also got all the resources throughout the industry to guide you to somebody who might be. So you can have a free strategy call with me. So if you'll message strategy call to me on LinkedIn, or if you'll send that to me in a text via my phone number, or if you'll send strategy call to ken@revheat.com, I'll send you our calendar link so that we can get on the calendar and schedule something over the course of the next week or so. I'd love to talk to you because you've stayed around long enough, so I know that this is a critically important part of what you're trying to accomplish as a business and a person. And so I'd love an opportunity to talk to you about just that. So schedule your strategy call to take advantage of that $9,950 in freebies that we'll provide for you. All right, as promised, this rocks too. So you can do both. You can have a strategy call and get the checklist. So get our free sales effectiveness checklist for free. All you have to do is message me checklist on LinkedIn or send me checklist at ken@revheat.com. We'll compare where you are and give you the ability to say, I have this or I don't have this on the 5 various levels we have for sales maturity. That's how good is your company at predicting, and how good is your company from a process perspective, skills, training versus the rest of the universe. And let's say that you find out you're in step 3, you're in stage 3. Great, because we're showing you what the checklist looks like for stage 4. And so you'll know exactly how you can action that. So please go ahead and send me that checklist and we'll get it back to you. Okay, now you have 2 choices. So the first option, you can do nothing and maintain the status quo, which may or may not be risk-free. If you're a sales leader and do nothing and the team's underperforming, well, be personal and reputational risk that goes with that. If you're a business that needs to grow and succeed, there's some things that go on. There's absolutely a risk sometimes of doing nothing. Second option is this. You can pony up the small amount of time it takes to have a strategy call with us. In that call, you'll learn, is there a better future for my company and for my team and for our sales success? Because just in 25 minutes, we'll figure out whether or not it makes sense. You may not even need our help. But it's up to you, because doing nothing is still a choice. So it's your choice. You can choose to do nothing, or you can choose to have a quick phone call where we might be able to help change the future for you and your company. All you need to do that, like we showed you before, just send me a message that says strategy call. You can text me, you can send it to my email address, or you can do it right here on LinkedIn by just clicking on my profile, and you'll be able to get to send me a message. But I'd love nothing more than to spend time getting to know you, whether we ever do anything or not. Once again, thank you so much for coming and for staying, and I hope you and your team nothing but the best sales success in the world. Peace.